Reese, pedal to the metal, go, go, go!
It's myself. I don't know if you can hear me. Yeah, you can. Okay, good. Making sure. Settings are all good. It's F4 time, and we're finally back as a partnership. Reese is back this week. I was away a couple of weeks ago. You have had some drip feeding of the duo, but here we are. We're back again, finally, for the final round of the season. Round 11 at the Circuit of the Americas. It's all to play for, Reese.
It is all to play for after a little bit of a disruption, as I can see from the results. A bit of a disruption around the United Arab Emirates, with Thomas Gal taking the win, closing that championship fight to today with only 3 points. So it's gonna be feisty, it's gonna be interesting, and I was speaking to you about the maths, and it gets very complicated as soon as you go past whoever doesn't win. If they don't win, it is literally, we're going to be here before the race, we'll be working it out when the race ends.
Yes, we'll be having a Suzuka 2022 situation where not even we know the rules. And then maybe we'll just announce somebody the winner of the championship kind of half-assedly, and it will be great success all round for everybody. Very nice. But yes, just to clarify then, our two championship protagonists going into tonight's race are Thomas Gal and Milan Meyer. They are the only two people currently within a shout of winning the Formula 4 championship. Thomas Lamminen, who was a previous championship leader, put himself out of contention by having two pretty poor weeks in a row. He's 19 points abreast of the top of the table, which means that he cannot mathematically win the championship because it is 16 points for a win here in PSGL, not the normal 25 in Grand Prix racing. So it is a bit confusing on the point scoring system, but just you'll have to trust us on this one. We sort of at least 75 to 80% know what we're talking about. And as such, it is going to be Milan Meyer and Thomas Gal. I think Thomas Gal currently holds a 3-point lead over Meyer at the top of the table. Yep. So that's the buffer that we're playing with coming into tonight.
Yeah, and the buffer is so minimal. But if you look further down the championship, you've got the likes. There are still positions that can be taken as well. So the battle for, I think, third is also up for contention with the likes of Thomas Lamminen, Rashan, Andrew Mornay, and I think Tripkov still has a shot in that contention as well. But realistically, this whole grid can change up below. But our minds and focus is ahead at the moment. We're looking ahead. We're going to be looking at particularly the top two, where they're going to come out, and throughout I'll try and give you a live update to how the championship looks throughout the race.
Yes, it is hopefully going to get underway very, very shortly. We have 17 drivers in the lobby for qualifying at the moment. Hopefully some more might join moving forward, but of course, short qualifying around the Circuit of the Americas. Weather can sometimes be a little bit unpredictable here as well, so who knows whether there's going to be some of those green or even blue Pirelli banded tyres coming into play. But with only a few seconds until qualifying is loaded on up, let's take a look at the track for this week, of course. It is Circuit of the Americas, Austin, Texas. It's a wonderful track with heavy elevation changes as well, one of which that I'm a really big fan of. Obviously, it's a motorcycle racing track too, but it goes from really high points up at turn 1. You got uphill braking into turn 1 as well, which means you can have a lot deeper into the braking zones and whatnot. Very exciting track, and I'm really excited for us to get in and sink our teeth into it this time around.
The brilliant thing about this track as well, it's one of my favourite tracks to commentate because the opportunity of overtaking. Yes, you've got the two brilliant straights from turn 20 to turn 1, and also from turn 11 to turn 12. Great overtaking opportunities, but it just doesn't end there. If the likes of turn 12, you can see a lot of scrapping between the drivers, especially for the first part of sector 3. So realistically, from turn 12 to turn 18, you really can see some fighting, and that's a lot of corners. 6 corners where you can fight side by side. Admittedly, 3 of those are technically one corner, but because it's double apexes and the way the track is, they get their own corner names. And That's what I love about this track. It really can be that unpredictable nature that can really pose some great racing for all of us.
Yes, and it's time now to crack on with qualifying. We've loaded in. Session is live. 10 seconds have gone by, and still yet anybody is not out on the track just yet. I will also bring up the appropriate things. Let's just quickly do that. Detail, we don't need that. Don't need telemetry. We need lap data, and we need a track map. That's what we need for this evening. Thomas Laminen is currently top of the leaderboard, but we'll see whether he ends up there. He's had a pretty poor couple of weeks, unfortunately, for Mr. Laminen. Menno looks like he's going to be the first man out of the pit lane. Bit of a mixed bag. If we were to do a season review on some of the drivers tonight, Reese, where would you kind of review Menno's season at, really?
Ooh, Menno, currently in P8 in this season. He's had 2 not startings, 1 DNF, and 2 no points from that. So it's been a mixed bag for Menno. He has been on the podium twice, but realistically, he's not been a strong kind of, not somebody we say is in contention, but a midfield pack fighter for sure. And he's had his ups and downs, and I feel when he does put his head on, as he did in Canada and in Monaco, and take account they're not easy tracks to nail, he can be really good. But I feel those opportunities missed for this guy. But let's see how he does today to see if he can bump himself up into the 3rd place fight.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a mixed bag of a season, like you say. He has had a couple of shining moments, like you mentioned with Canada and Monaco. Canada was one that definitely sprung to mind when thinking about this guy's season so far, but yeah, it's not been consistent, really, for Menno. He's had a few flashes of brilliance, but other than that, like you say, pretty comfortably occupying the midfield area for the most part on this season. But getting his first run out here, he'll be the first man across the line, first man to set a lap time here in this qualifying session, which means he'll be laying down the gauntlet and the benchmark. He is currently on the least rubbered track of anybody else, so likely as not those behind him who A, hold more pace, and B, will be benefiting from the slightly more improved track conditions, will be setting better times, but we'll get to see what his benchmark will be. We'll stick on for this lap time and see where he can put it. So, into turn 1. Pretty short braking zone because of the uphill area, and you can take a lot of curb in the F1 game. On the inside, it kind of helps you snatch a bit more time from the apexes, and it's the same throughout this entire S section, where you kind of descend down to rise back up. You take a lot of curb, you straddle the curbs almost on the apexes of most of them, and it can provide you with a lot of lap time if you get it right. It's all about carrying that speed on through.
Yeah, so I'm watching Milan Mayer, trying to see what he's doing. I was completely watching the wrong guy, but yeah, Milan Mayer turning it into turn 10, heading it up through this back straightaway. We're going to see a lot of overtaking. DRS is going to be prominent around this area, and this is where the fun begins. The sector 3, joy of overtaking, heavy braking to turn 11, drop it down to 3rd, and you'll notice the drivers short shifting very quickly as they go and exit corners. So here, 4th, and then as they pull away, quick shift up to 5th, and then shifting back down, and then again here, a quick shift midway through from 3rd to 4th to keep the traction going. This is a double apex. Technically, this is 3 corners. It's three apexes that you do tap before heading into turn 19. And then you've got to keep the car within those white lines for turn 20, which again, you take a reasonable amount of curb before straight lining the car to start-finish line, put it for 1:32.3.
Yeah, that's a pretty competitive lap time. Of course, now we're right to see Milan Mayer cross the finish line as well, just after us, the second man out on track. The lap was a little bit scrappy towards the end there. I was just keeping my eyes on it. A 32.7 from Milan Mayer. Qualifying was really his strong suit at the start of the season, but in the later portions of the season, it hasn't really been too favourable for him, so we'll have to see whether he can pull anything out the bag here today. Speaking of people who often pull things out the bag, Tomas Gal has just started his flying lap, as far as I'm aware. Down in P12 at the moment. No, this is not a flyer. He's invalidated it. Never mind.
Yeah, he invalidated it on his first run, and which is critical in this championship, because you want to be setting your benchmark. You want to be striking the fear in your competitor. And let's be honest, Milan Mayer's not set the strongest of times because he's just been beaten by Liam Stevens, and that lap time is slowly going further and further back from the rest of the pack.
Liam Stevens did have a very respectable performance last time out in Abu Dhabi, despite getting embroiled in some lap 1 and middle of the race carnage as well. So I think he's one to look out for in next season if he sticks around in Formula 4. I think he could definitely be a contender. He's shown really strong signs of improvement this season. So that's definitely one of my hot picks to look out for. But for the time being, Patrick Hadler is just finishing his first attempt at pole position, and this time it's not really going to be attempting much. It's considerably slower than everybody else who's set a lap time at the moment, and as such, will place him in P13.
Yeah, Hadler's been one of the drivers near the back of the grid this season, you know, not really wowing us necessarily. He does take the risk with a couple of interesting strategies, but he's one of those where I think he's been put into this tier, and it's at a stretch. And it is no disrespect to Hadler. He has been put in at a stretch, and sometimes he performs, but there is a lot of times where he's not wowing, but he is there and being another driver to the grid.
Yeah, I mean, he's had a few decent performances, I think, where I've definitely seen his name up in the upper echelons of this championship a few times this season. Unfortunately, like you say, it's just not been consistently enough to really make him a protagonist or a real hero in the championship by any means. A bit like Bartosz Samaro in that regard, who's been a driver who's definitely exhibited a lot of pace over the course of the season at various intervals, but just hasn't really been able to, A, keep it together, and then B, string it together for any really appreciable amount of time. Often getting embroiled in all manner of incidents, DNFs, crashes. Zamaro has been one of those, whereas Hadler has just not really been too on the pace, I think, this season. But as it is, still, as it stands currently, Menno, the driver who went out first on track, and who had the worst track conditions due to it not being rubbered in by any stretch of the imagination, still holds P1 at the moment by 0.02 of a second.
He does. And I was going to quickly talk about Sven Schumacher as we're kind of doing a recap of all these drivers. Sven Schumacher joined in a little bit late, came out with a no, got the wrong driver. Nearly came out with a wow. He came in third race in, and from the get-go, his pace in qualifying is one to die for. He has pace on track, but when it comes to race pace, it just disappears. He does not have the racecraft, he doesn't have the race pace, and it's something he is developing. It's something we are, again, as much as these drivers are, it is getting better. But seeing him up again, P3, we know he's fast. He just needs to convert it and get some good points. That being said, he's currently P9 in this championship because he is getting points constantly, so that is helping him out in this championship.
Yeah, I think Schumacher has got a bit of a way to go in his development cycle, but for the time being, he is really exhibiting quite some good signs of being a positive driver. Last time out in Abu Dhabi, I know a few of the drivers on the grid weren't too happy with the way that he was driving. That caused some controversy in the post-race. But just generally aggressive, often on a different strategy to everybody else as well, if you recall, picking the medium tyres early on in the race rather than towards the end, so he makes early progress and then falls back slowly towards the end of the race. And often that can frustrate people when you're on a different tyre compound anyway. But looking back towards qualifying now, to our championship protagonists, who admittedly aren't really featuring too heavily at the moment. Tomás Gau currently coming to the end of his outlap, on his second run, of course. His first time round the Circuit of the Americas, he invalidated his hot lap attempt. Now we'll get to see whether he does the same here again. Here we go. Lighting it up as we barrel towards turn one. Reese, take us through this first sector.
Yeah, absolutely. As I quickly change to his POV as he comes down into turn 2. This is part of the S section, and it's very critical that once you get into turn 3 here, you line it up correctly, because 4, 5, 6, 7, you have to nail those, because if you go slightly offline, you lose so much time. You saw Tomás Gau ran a bit wide there on the corner, so he's lost momentum, he's lost the flow where he doesn't want to be through turn 9, and then it's heavy braking into turn 10. Shift it down to third. Some drivers like to stick it to fourth, and then you drive it back up. Put on the power, higher gear gives you more traction, and you start to put the DRS down. You are going to be hitting speeds about 202 miles an hour, which is about, what, 315 kilometers? Before you brake heavily, and you could easily lock up here, and you will see drivers lock their rear tyres and their fronts as well, and sometimes go straight on if we see this track going wet. But being qualifying, it's nice and dry. This corner here, lovely. Turn 15, it's almost like Bahrain. You got to straight line the car and then quickly turn in. As we go around the corner, Milan Mayer puts 132.2. He's going to come round into turn 19. Thomas Gao has got some work to do. He's messed up in the first sector, but how much time is that lost? Coming round the final corner, approaches the line. It's very short run. It's only good enough for P7 at this moment. Milan Mayer might take the championship.
Yeah, he's drawn first blood there, definitely with that lap from Milan Mayer. Thomas Gao, definitely not perfect on that lap. We saw that little bit drifting wide in the first sector. And then again, over towards turn 15, didn't quite nip the apex as you would like to. And then again at turn 19, wasn't quite tight on it as you would like to be as well. So not an ideal start to the weekend for Thomas Gao, but he's still got a couple more opportunities to put that car right where he wants it and towards the front row. Speaking of front row, Menno currently on a bit of a Herculean effort, outperforming what he's done so far this season. Also, don't discount Andrew Karapi from this weekend as well. Home race for him, of course, being the sole American on the grid. He'll definitely want to put in a good performance, and so far is definitely putting his best foot forward. But for Menno, as he rounds the final corner to cross the line, he sets a new pole position time, just 0.04 of a second faster than Milan Mayer, but those 0.04 of a second are quite the big gap between P1 and 2.
It is a massive gap, and this track isn't easy to nail. As I mentioned, this first sector, the drivers flying through, you have to nail it right. Don't nail it right, and you don't get a good lap time. I'm trying to see who is currently on a lap, as I think that a lot of the drivers are finishing their first run.
Is finishing one at the moment. I think most people on track have
just Adelaide's going on a different...
Run.
I just noticed Adelaide's going against the flow. He's hesitated, and he's wanting to go out a bit later. So he's currently on an outlap, trying to use the track evolution to his advantage.
Well, Nicola Aleda might have to put a little bit of a hustle on if he wants to get another run in after this. Just, I think he will have plenty of time, but just might want to be careful of how much he's pushing the tyres on the outlap. That would be my only concern. Interestingly, Alexander Johansson still yet to set a time. He is invalidated this lap. I'm not sure whether this is an outlap or an in-lap or whatever it might be, but either way, it's another invalidation for Alexander Johansson. But yes, Aleda, like you mentioned, completely out of sync with everybody else on track. And I think that has been the end of most people's second run. I'll check in with Liam Stevens. No, he's cruising, unfortunately. So he's not really doing much. Patrick Hadler, is he pushing on? Doesn't look like it. That line was a bit suspect, but either which way, he's flashing red light, so one would expect that he's coming into the pits. So it really will just be Nicola Aleda in the other Williams to see what he can do now, crossing the start-finish straight to start his hot lap, as realistically the only driver on track to be on one. Already slightly wide of turn 1, far wider than I would want to be if I were trying to compete for a Formula 4 podium. As it is, though, so far so good in this sector. Just needs to get anything a little bit better than a 32.7. Definitely very attainable, and we're seeing 0.6 be the difference between P15 and P1 at the moment. There's a lot of time to be gained. The field is very tight-knit. I mean, look at, just for example, from P7 all the way down to P12 is just 0.1 of a second.
Phil Adelaide was a bit too hesitant out of turn 8. Just the way he lifted off and going into that corner, it was very hesitant. It didn't feel right. That's all I can say. So I don't feel this lap might be a championship-looking lap, but let's see what he can do in the final sector. What can he gain on his time? Actually, second sector, going a 10th down, purple, according to the game. So something went right somewhere. So I am wrong.
Oh, a little bit of a squirmy exit there from the hairpin, but now hopefully just going to be able to get it straight lined out and cruising with the downforce through this triple apexed turkey-esque right-hander. And now gets through to turn 19 and 20 to try and finish up the lap. This could be a reasonable lap time from Nicola Aleda. What's he got in the bin? Nothing, unfortunately. It is just going to be a 32.496. So does pip out his teammate Patrick Hadler, but it's nothing exceptional to put himself into the top 10 just yet. But let's not get it twisted. This field is exceptionally closely contested at the moment. So by all means, got plenty of time still to play with. And Nitro Shooter, who I believe scored his a reasonably good race last time out. I think potentially even a maiden podium, if I'm not mistaken, but I could be.
Yep. Yeah, it was a maiden podium on... Yeah. Well, it wasn't. He's been He's appeared here and there. First came out in Portugal, didn't score any points. Then he came out in Belgium, got 1 point, so he came P10. And then I believe that's P8 in Australia, and then getting a podium for second place in Abu Dhabi. So he's been not a strong name in our discussions, but he's been there through the latter part of this season to essentially disrupt the back runners. But I'm currently looking at Thomas Gal. Now, guys don't have the telemetry, but Thomas Gal is trying to dump a truckload of fuel. He's going at lower gears, revving the car to the max. He's just trying to make this car as light as possible before his final run. Taking account, he's down in P14, and his championship contender is Milan Mayer, currently P2.
Just to be clear, by the way, for those of you who are uninitiated into why people do this, is because there is a minimum fueling requirement. And as such, you wouldn't get this in regular F1 cars in real life because it would absolutely destroy the engine life. But as there is no real engine life problems in F1 22 online because it resets from week to week, you don't get that problem, you don't get those technical malfunctions. And as such, you can just run the car on the rev limiter, essentially, in order to try and burn as much fuel as is possible to make that car as light as possible. And Thomas Gal, as you mentioned, Reese, has a lot of work to do here. That looked a bit slidey. It did not look nice at all from behind, but whether it was on board, it may have looked better. Maybe it's just the perception of the camera, who knows? But either way... Oh, that's a big snap of oversteer. This has not been a tidy lap so far from Thomas Gal, and absolutely won't have the fuel to go again with how much he was burning on that previous lap. Wide of the apex there, tries to get the power down. This has not been a tidy qualifying session from your championship leader. This has been very, very sloppy. Of course, invalidating his first run, making a series of mistakes on the second, and now looking like he's not very comfortable here on the third. Just looks like the car isn't with him, really. Like a little bit too snappy at the rear, just kind of drifting away from me. He's 4.5 tenths down on his previous best time. It looks to me like Thomas Gal is not going to be improving at all here. This time, much better on the apex at turn 15, but still not surely going to be enough to trouble the top 10.
No, not at all. The car, as you're saying, it's not with him. He's not one with the car. Unless his car is set up for something that we don't know. But Thomas Gal is going wide. Of course, we don't know the weather conditions for the race, so he does not improve. He stays P14. Is it that the car's set for a wet race? Is that maybe that's happening here?
I have no idea, but I wouldn't expect the car to be that oversteery if it was on a wet setup. It would be understeering, if anything, so you have stability in the rear of the car. But anyway, for Milan Mayer, what's he got to offer currently on his flying lap? Barreling it down the back straight, up towards, like you mentioned, highs of 200 miles per hour. Now going to get it down the gears. Successfully cuts enough of the curb to make that time look reasonable. But he, of course, still has about 0.04 of a second to gain. And he's currently 0.05 of a second down on Menno, who's currently still residing in that pole position space and may still be the one to take that pole position, because at the moment I'm not seeing any purple sectors out of Milan Mayer. He's got a lot of work to do in this final sector. Menno does not improve his time as he crosses the line. That's his session over. Very nicely delicate on the apex there, and now got to do the same thing for the final corner. Don't light it up, Milan, otherwise you're going to be in some trouble. Crosses the line and manages to pip him to the post. Menno ends up P2. Istvan Nagy slats in P3. Surely going to try and make a meal of it for his teammate. Andrew Karapi now also entering this final sector, Reese. This could be a very spicy end to qualifying if people are able to put some decent times on the board.
Yeah, Zamaro puts a good time in on the board, and there's still drivers to come across, known drivers to be fast. Thomas Laminen is down on his time, so he's not going to be a contender for now. But yeah, Karapi, home race. This is where he wants to shine. It's where he wants to show the American fans that, yes, just because we drive IndyCar doesn't mean we can't drive Formula 1. Round the final corner he goes. It's a short run. Is it good enough for a good improvement? It's P5, so he moves up a row. Indeed, but Nitro Shooter! Wow!
What an improvement from Nitro Shooter week on week, of course.
5 seconds!
That's probably not... I don't know whether that will be enforced. It has to be enforced, doesn't it? Because we just go straight in. So illegal blocking. That's really peculiar. I don't know what's happened there for Milan Mayer. Whether I don't know whether that's going to be applied because his car is in AI.
It's still going to be applied to the game. It's a
don't-
glitch within the game that's meant that he is going to serve that
That's
penalty.
whack. That's really brutal if that is the case. But
He
let's not take anything away right now. Let's just keep our focus on Nitro Shooter because what a performance he has just put in that qualifying session. Kind of nowhere throughout the course of the first two runs, and then on the third run, nails the entire lap together for a 32-0. Really impressive stuff. Blows Milan Mayer out of the water, and of course Menno too. That five position penalty seems to like it's going to be sticking around. So that is going to throw a serious spanner in the works.
It will. But Nitro, wow. We said before he joined late, came into Portugal, wasn't anything much. Then he came into Belgium. There was something, and then the next race in Australia again, nothing. And then last week to get a podium, and now to be qualifying on pole. Is he been a dark horse that is, joined this league late and possibly could have been championship contender if he was here from the get-go?
I think he's been a slow burner, one of those type people that's just ever so much better in the second half of the season at the moment. I think also having the confidence of that podium last time out, even despite the result change that happened after the fact, still getting that podium, even on track, is massive for your confidence and massive for your motivation as well. It really makes you want to put some effort in for the championship finale, despite the fact that you're not in the contention, you're not in the race for it. Why not? Might as well give it a go. But now it's race time, and it looks like it is sunny in Austin. Who's really surprised? It is usually warm in Texas, and if it's in the middle of summer, which usually this race takes place in. So a good time to be a fan of Formula One if you're one of these virtual people, NPCs, just sitting on the grandstand, just randomly pumping their fists and clapping at cars stationary on the grid, as you do.
Of course. Pure excitement.
Migrating host is not a good sign for me. That usually means that somebody's left the lobby and we're getting a lobby remake for whatever reason. I don't know whether that is the case here.
Yeah, I've just now got it. I'm going to quickly check and let you know.
Check that chat for me. As the migrating host thing may be because of Milan Mayer's penalty. Maybe it was...
It is a restart. Okay. It is a restart. The tier coordinator has called it.
Session restart then, folks. We will go to a quick break in the meantime while that session restart is orchestrated. We'll see you on the other side of this. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Premier Sim Gaming Leagues. It is Formula 4 time. Of course, a little interlude there as there was an issue between qualifying and the race. So now, all being well, the grid should be set appropriately, the weather should be set appropriately for the race. Of course, this is the championship decider, the final race of the season. It is Tomas Gal and Milan Meyer who are your two championship protagonists. Both of them sit at the top of the table, just 3 points separating the pair of them. We have a few conditions for victory. We have a few conditions for success. But today, we are worried about good racing above all. And hopefully, we're going to get some of that. So, we've got 5 seconds until we're ready to go. Or maybe even just less than that. Hopefully, there is not any more issues and we have to restart again. For the time being, it looks like we're good to go. We're going to have 2, 3, 4, and 5 red lights. And with those, we are off to the races. Nitro Shooter, your unlikely pole sitter, gets a reasonably good start, but it is Milan Meyer who is ready to slot it up the inside at turn 1, and that is exactly what he will do. He will hang Nitro Shooter out to dry around the outside, and now Menno looks like he might be looking to try and take advantage of this situation too. He's gone and slid up the inside as well, and that is 2 positions lost for our pole sitter right off the start.
Yeah, not a good start from Nitro Shooter, but he's got to play the strategy game. He's put himself in a great position off the get-go. Just play the long game. You're currently in 3rd. That isn't too bad, especially in his fight lower down in the championship. It is good for him. Tomas Gal, who is our other championship contender, has gained 5 position. He's currently P10. He's looking to try and get 1 more. That'll be against the Williams, and that's easy picking because that's now P9 off the get-go. So 6 positions for our championship leader, and more fighting is going on ahead. It looks to be between Andrew Karapi and the 2 drivers ahead of him, which is Zama.
Oh no, there's been carnage, there's been contact. Tomas Gal on the mediums has just gone straight into the back of Jane Tripkov, spun him around when trying to make a move on Rishan. That probably will end up being a penalty for Tomas Gal. I can't see a way in which it's not. That is 100% on him. He brakes later, goes into the back of a car that is already in the corner. No way that's not a penalty for Gal.
Yeah, and what makes it worse, he's down to 48% ERS. He's used a truckload to be aggressive. He knows that he has to jump the queue from the get-go. 8 positions in 1 lap. Tomas Gal is here for blood, ladies and gents, and he's going to go for 1 more down the inside into turn 1. That's Andrew Karapi, resident American for the track, and yeah, there is blood boiling inside the Red Bull car.
I wouldn't be too worried if I'm some of these drivers ahead of him, though. If I'm honest, I might just be inclined to let him go. This is not my race. My race is not with this guy. He's the only driver on the grid to be using those medium tyres. Literally the only driver on the grid at the moment to be using them. So I would not be worried. If he's going to try and make an aggressive move like he is on Laminen at the moment, I'm not going to let him ruin my race. If I'm Laminen, I'm just going to let him fly. There's no reason to try and get myself held up by battling with this guy. I'm only going to lose time. He's on a faster tyre and I'll get him later on. There's no risk in that for me. As Gal makes his way into P5, now 14% of his battery remaining as he barrels down, trying to catch DRS of Bartosz Samaro, as Laminen looks up the inside once again, but it's only a look. It's only a look. It's not a move. It's not a dress rehearsal. Laminen not going to make any moves on this. It's instead going to be Gal having to make a big run now of a second up to the back of Zamaro. Meanwhile, at the front of the field, Milan Meyer comfortable and calm. No real threat from Menno behind. He has a 6/10 buffer, and at the moment, with the fastest lap of the race being set on the first lap for him, he is in a strong position to make this race his own.
Yeah, Gal, the reattempt for Laminen, which he decided against, actually pushed Andrew Karapi to go into the rear end of him. No major damage to the car, but then Andrew Karapi was then pushed further back into Rishan's territory. A guy who we keep speaking so positively about, but he doesn't get the results. He was leading the championship from the start, and then has dropped downwards from there. So he hasn't improved like the other drivers. But currently P8, Rishan is looking at the resident American, and he's going, oh, might be an opportunity here. But we're in lap 3, so this is really the last chance to make an overtaking opportunity before it settles down and you play the strategy game.
Yeah, this is where the moves need to get made, and I think Tomas Gal is going to be acutely aware of that as he closes in on Bartosz Samaro, who yet somehow as he seems to often do, has picked up a 3-second time penalty already for track limits violations. So that's not a great start for the Alpine driver. That DRS is open and that battery is expended for Gal. So he's not going to be making up much ground now on Zamaro in front. Instead, the real cause for concern here at the front of the field, especially for Gal, is the fact that Nitro Shooter has almost completely lost touch with those leading two.
Yeah, that's going to be a major yikes. And Nitro Shooter, he, as I said, brilliant qualifying lap. It's converting it into the race pace, which is the hardest thing to do. We said the same thing about Schumacher, who again, you know, put in a good performance prior, is now down 6 positions in 14th. So is Nitro going to be one of those type of people, or is he going to demonstrate, actually, I've got some pace and I'm just weighing it out here because he's just closed the gap again? So maybe he is weighing it out, just testing the waters here, as Alexander Johansson, who I bigged up from the get-go, has retired, and so has Schumacher as well.
Yeah, season to forget for Johansson, to be frank with you. Not really being the best of his memories to be had here in season 32. Didn't really get the results that he wanted or that he was even capable of in many of these races. And when he was in a position to get those results, I think in Monaco, didn't really go his way. So, unfortunate season for Alexander Johansson, but he'll be back. Sven Schumacher, I don't know what happened there. I'm guessing some kind of contact, some kind of damage. He was already coming into the pits quite some way off the back of the field with Johansson. So, who knows? Didn't catch it on the camera at the very least. Maybe someone will have something to say about it later on. But as someone having something to say, Tomas Gal is starting to look a little bit more peachy. Again behind Bartos Zamaro. Dives towards that apex. Makes that move stick for now. And Zamaro, I think, just kind of lets him have that one. Doesn't really want to get in his way if he's going to be making aggressive moves like that. Now Gal has his sights set firmly on the back of the Alpha Tauri ahead of him. Won't want to waste too much time before dispatching Nitro Shooter ahead.
Yeah, and he is, as we're saying, I think we've reiterated it quite a lot, he's aggressive, he's hungry to gain these positions and early on, because we said about Nitro Shooter losing touch with second place. Let's be honest, Menno's losing touch with Maya, so Maya is trying his absolute goddamn best to pull a second against the second place position, because he's now seeing, he can physically see on his screen that Tomas Gal has put himself into P4, and he's noted down that this man started in P15, sorry. So this is a threat, even with two cars in between the two.
Tomas Gal is a man on a mission today. He is being very aggressive and also overdriving the car a little bit, I feel. I think that's what we saw over the course of qualifying. Really desperate to kind of get himself on that front row and ended up backfiring completely. And now he's driving very aggressively as well. I've seen him miss quite a few apexes just because he's trying to brake so deep and make up that time on the brakes. Often what you'll end up seeing in situations like this, people driving tight throughout the course of this whole season. Tomas Gal has been one of the most relaxed and calculated drivers. He's just happy to have sat behind people at many stages of this season and kind of bided his time. But in this race, he looks tight. He looks anxious, frigid, if you will. Not really able to relax up a little bit and get himself eased into this race. He doesn't really have the time for that either at the moment, with the way that this field is starting to spread out and how he needs to make progress on these medium tyres while he's still got them beneath him.
Yeah, and I'm noticing Tomas Gal's really gaining a lot of time in Sector 3. That is his strength right now, because it lines himself up quite nicely for Turn 1. As he comes up to Turn 20, exit out. He then builds up a little bit of charge through turns, I think it's turns, get my words out, 16, 17, and 18. Builds up a bit of charge, and then he doesn't use too much on the exit of Turn 20. Bides his time again, a little burst here and there through turns 3, 4, and then 5, and he's gaining time, and there's Nitro Shooter going a bit wide. That's a bit of an opportunity for Tomas Gal, really. He's got a shot here to maybe get himself onto the podium, but still as it stands, and a live update, if this race ends as it is, Milan Mayer will be crowned season 32, isn't it, champion of PSGL.
Yep, this will be a tough pill to swallow for Tomas Gal, who undoubtedly has had a better tail end to the season than his fellow countrymen. But here, for Gal, he's not really making up any time or any places. He needs to either force a mistake out of Nitro Shooter or just bide his time and save his battery. But I don't think the second of those two options is going to really be in Tomas Gal's vocabulary today. He is, like I said, looking aggressive and wanting to make progress. But immediately, like again, at the end of that straight there, outbroke himself a little bit, got himself a bit flummoxed, and as such, ended up losing about 2.5 tenths of a second to Nitro Shooter. So that's going to come back to bite him as he now has to work really hard through this final sector in order to make that time back. And he has done so to a degree, but needs to get a good exit here out of turn 20. And I don't think he's really got it.
No, I think he's got a good exit. It's whether he has enough ERS and a good run into turn 1. That is not going to be there. And you can see the defensive line from the AlphaTauri really covering off the inside line to deny the Red Bull from attacking. But we have a fight at the front with Tomas Gal running through the field. But I was going to say, Roshan was the next driver really fighting. But actually, must have made a mistake because he's now a second behind Andrew Karapi. And is the first of the top 10 to make a break out of the second mark.
Yeah, I feel like we've seen that a few times from Roshan this season. Just last time out at Abu Dhabi as well, he ended up making a mistake and just continuously dropped back out of DRS further and further and further. Whereas at the start of the season, if you remember, back in Barcelona, he was able to recover a massive deficit against Jan Halliday, who was already leading that race at the time. And this time around, later portions of the season, he doesn't seem to have that same venom, that same time attack sort of personality or happenstance about the car when he's in these race situations. I don't know what it is, just gets bogged down in the midfield and can't really do well. Whatever it might be, I wish Roshan the best next season. Hopefully he can overcome some of those demons that's been plaguing him this season, because he has been a bit of a talent when he's got it right on the day.
Yeah, and he's not as well as that lovely guy to speak to. You know, he's definitely brought kind of a bit of competition within the grid because everyone set their eyes on him. And yeah, he genuinely brings good presence to this racing. He has a good mentality and a good work ethic towards this, and it's just not his season. A good start, but not his season. But I want to focus our attention a little bit on Karapi because Tomas Gal's come a bit of a stalemate. Karapi's really closed down on Laminin, and then Laminen's trying to push to Zamaro really hard. These guys have been at each other's throats for the last lap. So the question is, who's going to risk it in this kind of what I would call the quieter section of racing? Who's maybe going to make a move because they're bored of sitting still? As I'm just going to focus your attention back to Tomas Gal, who closed that gap to 2/10, but poor exit, sorry. Got a bit excited.
I think he just outbraked himself again, got a little bit too close into the apex of the corner, trying to make it all up on braking, and then once again didn't really have it on the exit. Nitro Shooter, though, is getting dangerously close to losing that DRS here in this final sector, so that might give Gal the break that he is looking for, but the then difficulty will be making sure that he can get back into the DRS of Menno and Mayer ahead, because if he is not able to do so, he has no battery, so really doesn't have much of a response, and we'll have to wait until the pit stop phase, where he'll inevitably lose time anyway because of the tyre compound discrepancy that will be happening. So Tomas Gal here is starting to have himself painted into a corner a little bit if he can't make this move on Nitro Shooter sooner rather than later, because those tyres are only getting worse with every lap that goes by, and they're getting closer and closer to that switchover point where the hard tyres will just be faster.
Yeah, and what also makes it worse, Nitro Shooter's been using his battery quite a lot. He's only down to 25%. Even though we know Tomas Gal, by the red flashing light, he's less than 10%. He's actually at 5. He's running on the bare minimum and constantly using his battery to attack. Nitro has had to respond just to keep with the front runners to keep his DRS intact, as Roshan's going to get a 3-second time penalty as the penalties are going to slowly creep up throughout this race, and with a quick mention of the track actually, and it brings to a brilliant point. We're going to see a lot of time penalties here because of the nature of the circuit. There's a lot of places you are trying to cut corners to gain an advantage without breaking the rules.
Yeah, this is one of those tracks where you're going to accumulate a lot of time penalties. It's just naturally going to happen. Even at the highest tiers of racing, we see it happen on this track. As Liam Stevens, I think, has just made a move on Patrick Hadler a bit further back, but that's a nice one at the very least. But looking again further up the field to Tomas Gal, currently his situation is not improving. Every time he gets really close into the apexes of corners, but it's the exit where he's really struggling. I don't know whether it's a setup difference comparative to those around him, but he just seems to not have the same pace that he had before. Of course, those tyres are going to be starting to wear out a bit, and you'll see that exemplified more and more as we go through that triple apexed corner in the final sector. That turn, what is it, 16, 17, and 18 sequence.
Yep.
That's where you're going to start to see the delta expanding between these two tyres, whereas before, that would be where Gal made up almost all of his time, because that's where the tyres would be most effective. But it's also where the tyres get most brutalised.
It is. It's the harshest section of the track. Of course, you also got the heavy braking zones, so such as turn 11, 12, 1, and I guess you can say 19, realistically, quite a heavy braking zone.
3-second time penalty for Tomas Gal. And plus, you got to think as well, that might get compounded with the penalty that he's inevitably going to get for taking out, I think it was Tripkov at the start of the race as well. This is looking more and more like Tomas Gal's race is going to be lost for him at the moment.
Yeah, and as I was mentioning about those braking zones, those heavy braking zones are going to add some extra stress to the tyre. Once those tyres start to wear out, you don't have the grip, and inevitably, you're going to then lock up, as Gal does have a little peak. He's eyeing up the move. It's the closest he's been for a while. But yeah, you tend, because they start to overheat as well, and they wear down, you lock up those tyres easier, and once you lock up once, guess what? They lock up again and again and again. It just kills your tyres more.
Absolutely does. You are bang on there. And I think as well, for Milan Mayer, seeing that there's a 3-second time penalty for Tomas Gal, likely is not knowing about the incident with the Haas earlier on in the Grand Prix as well. He's just going to be chilling now. He sees that 3-second time penalty. He sees Gal going into the pits. He sees all of that. And I think for Milan Mayer, he's quite happy to just relax now. He can drive his own race. He's got a few different buffers ahead of him. He's got that 3-second time penalty. He knows he's going to have the tyre advantage. He's got all of these things in his hands. Playing with a bit of a stacked deck, you might say. As Milan Mayer, I think, can just drive his own race now. Doesn't need to do anything particularly explosive or dynamic. He just knows that he needs to finish ahead of Tomas Gal in a position where he'll outscore him by 4 points or more.
Yeah, and do you want to hear the best thing about Milan Mayer's situation? He's actually had 0 warnings for track limits. You get 3 warnings, then you get a time penalty. So this man has been driving super clean right now, and he's going to be happy with the situation now, not seeing his championship contender right behind him, and being an early stop, lap 11 as well. It's going to boost your confidence. You're going to feel quite good. Of course, you still have to be wary because he's made that pit stop. And from the get-go, Tomas Gal's going to have those fresher tyres. But the load gets lighter and the cars get faster and wet tyre life gets better. So, Milan Mayer, who's going from the hards to the mediums, that's a better favour to be in. And the threat is then further neutralised.
Absolutely. And the other thing you've got to think of as well is the tyre warm-up on the hard tyres is much, much longer than that of the mediums. So the one thing to keep your eye on here, folks, if you just want to have a passive observing experience, is to see what Tomas Gal's delta to Jerifu up ahead is. If that continues to come down at an alarming rate, which it is currently, but that could also just be driver difference, if it comes down very, very quickly, I'm talking a second and a half per lap, and yes, for now, we'll be seeing these hard tyres struggling. And let's not get it twisted either. The Circuit of the Americas is a very tough track on tyres, as we've been discussing. Braking zone's very heavy. You're leaning on the outside tyres consistently through the S section, putting a lot of load, especially through the fronts. And as such, you tend to find that they get a bit warm. You're going to have that hard braking into the later portions of the lap. And, of course, that turns 16, 17, and 18 complex, where you are massively leaning on the outside tyres. It heats them up so much, and if they get to a certain temperature, you'll just lose all grip and you'll go round. So it's very important to keep those tyre temperatures under control around this track. You can easily beat the tyres up, and as such, you've got to be very careful with how you play it. So Tomas Gal, on these, he's got what now? 14 laps worth of racing to go on these hard tires. Needs to make them last. Needs to make sure he's not a detriment to himself by the end of the race. So, yeah, while it's great pushing on at the moment, you've got to be careful of that later on.
Yeah, and I'll tell you who's pushed quite early. Zamaro and Laminen both do not really have battery life in their cars. 13 for Zamaro, who is only just not getting the flashing light, but Laminen down at 8%, and they're currently situated P4, P5. They're trying to claw on the edge of Nitro Shooter, who is taking a step back, and at one point I said Nitro Shooter was struggling for ERS. Well, he's actually regained it. He's deploying it now just to try and stay within the second mark of Menno in front of him. But when you've used so much battery, you do put yourself in that horrible position where now you have to keep deploying it just to keep up with the guy in front of you.
Yeah, that is often the case, especially if the person in front of you just has naturally more pace than you as well without deploying any ERS. That's always going to be difficult, and I think that's what's happening really to Nitro Shooter here. Whilst he had it on the faster tyres in qualifying, we may see him get a little bit faster when it comes to the mediums. Maybe his setup or maybe just the way he's been practicing is generally going to be more accommodating to those faster, softer compound tyres by comparison to the ones he's on at the moment. I've seen that before, so that's not all too uncommon amongst league racers. But Menno is looking a little bit more threatening than he has done on the previous times around this area now. He's out within 4 tenths, was 3 tenths around just as we went into that hairpin. I'm not sure whether he's going to be making any moves just yet, but if he were to, now would be the time, because we're getting dangerously close to that pit stop phase, and that would be the time to make those moves.
Yeah, you want to try and jump people early. If you go into the pits in front of the driver, you're going to come out, you have that split second more time where you can quickly warm up your tyres. That's assuming the driver behind you comes in with you. But if they don't, then it's a case of, right, how much pace does the driver behind me have or the driver in front have when I go into the pit? Are they going to be able to push at that extra lap? The undercut has, on this track, it's not the strongest. It does work, but it's hit and miss. Going for a 2-lap undercut, though, now that is a ridiculously strong strategy, and it really does show. And come the end of the race, yes, you're two laps lighter on those. I say 2 laps lighter, 2 laps more used. Come the end of the race, but realistically, those 2 laps don't make a difference in the latter end of the race. So, who's going to be the first one to trigger, and who's going to be the latest to trigger?
Yeah, it's a bit of a staring contest right now. Everyone's just waiting for the first driver to blink. And then pretty much after that, they should all follow suit to try and cover off one another, getting A, too far away, or B, too far ahead. So that's the other thing you got to keep in mind. For Milan Mayer especially, as he is the leading car, he just has to stick to his strategy, stick to his plan, essentially, because Menno will just react to whatever it is that he does. Same with everybody else behind, but if somebody behind decides to go rogue and divert from the prescribed wisdom of the race leader, that's their funeral, I suppose. They've got to make their own bed. They've got to lie in it, as they say. Mascal, quick update at the back of the field, has been making some steady progress. He's made about 5 seconds worth of time since going onto those hard compound tyres. So that really does show that these hard tyres that have been strapped on since the start of the race for all the drivers on track haven't really been that greatly looked after at the moment.
He's in. Karapi is going to be the first one to shoot his shot, and being in P5, I don't blame. P6. I don't blame him for doing it. You're in that mid pack. You're the first guy to really make the call. Let's see what happens, and Rashan's going to join him as well.
Yeah, so is Nicola Aleda as well, who's just dived into the pit lane a little bit further back from these guys. So we'll see now where the progress lies for Karapi and Rashan. Now, the thing you've got to keep your eyes peeled for is tyre warm-up. It's very, very costly in this track specifically. You need the tyres to be in the window for this first sector, otherwise you are skidding off into a barrier at about 150 miles an hour. There's no two ways about it. You need the tyres to be in the window, but you need to be careful with how you bring them in. So that's the difficulty here, especially with how reliant this track is on the high load of the tyres in the first sector and the third sector. So tyre warm-up, very, very important, which is why you mentioned before about the double undercut, the 2-lap undercut being so effective, because you get an extra lap where those tyres are warm and they are operating.
Yeah, and Karapi, I don't know if you're viewing him, but I'm definitely viewing him. As soon as he came out the first turn, the rear end is sliding out. That first turn is not easy. You really do have to keep your mind on it. Be careful of how much you're pressing down on that throttle, because it's going to be so easy to spin. And that being said, he does put a purple middle sector, so now the tyres are fired up at the end of the first
Menno
sector.
in, Nitro Shooter in, Laminin in, the rest of the leaders all coming into the pits. Bartosz
Zamara
Samaro,
isn't.
the only one to stay out. Why not? I mean, what have you got to lose, really? It's final race of the season. You've got a 3-second time penalty already. You got no ERS. Might as well get a bit of clear track and try and put some space between you for at least a lap,
Gal's
right?
coming around the final corner. Just to point out, Gal's coming around the final corner. Is this going to be the strategy call that might lead to something good? The exit, here it comes, as there is the championship lead contenders. He's just behind.
Oh.
He's going to be behind in front of Menno, but those tyres are warmed up. They're fresh. They're hard. So now Thomas Gal's going to have to push hard, make the overtake as early as possible, because if he can put his car ahead, he's going to be a pain in the backside for Milan Mayer.
Absolutely is, and he's going to have the DRS on Milan Mayer, of course, this time around as well. The only difference being, I'm going to assume, is there's big discrepancies in battery between the two drivers. Still has that DRS, no funny games played by Milan Mayer this time around. He's comfortable at the moment. So now, here we go. Tomasz Gal on the attack, trying to get what he can, but he is 5/10 back at the moment. The DRS, surely, is not going to be enough to close it down from that distance. Milan Mayer doing everything he can with the battery to try and defend against his championship rival, and has done so successfully. Now with these medium tyres starting to get warmed up, surely this is going to be the nails being hammered into Tomasz Gal's championship hopes coffin, because he is just going to get driven away from by these medium tyres. The tyre delta is really that big. Believe me when I say, you will not see Milan Mayer on your screen for much longer, because he is just romping away a whole 1/10.5 through that triple right-hander. Another time wide of the apex, and DRS is merely a pipe dream for Tomasz Gal now, as is his championship hopes.
Absolutely, Samaro into the pits, and you can see how defensive Tomasz Gal goes. This is just for pride. He's trying to fight on with dear life, and that early run, we all knew that he had to go mediums off the get-go to get up into this top position, but unfortunately, it has cost him dear, and Tomasz Gal's going to be under threat once again. It's going to be Nitro next, and Nitro, who started this race on pole, didn't have the greatest start. Well, you've got an opportunity to reclaim a position back, as he's going to make the move most likely into turn 10. If he really wants to, he could eye up an opportunity, but no, he's going to wait just a moment. He does have DRS, and he's going to make an easy overtake into turn 11.
He's got way more battery as well. That's the other thing to consider. There's no hope for Tomasz Gal to defend against that one. Literally 0%. You can see that red indicator on his steering wheel from the onboard. Nothing happening for Gal here, and Karapi behind is almost certainly going to be the next predator of this poor, defenseless driver. He's getting swamped back into the field. The only driver on the hard tyres, apart from Istvan Nagy, I believe, who had an incident early and swapped over, despite a good qualifying, quite sadly, for Istvan Nagy. Either which way, whatever way you slice it, Milan Mayer has come off all the better from that little altercation, because the hard tyres being strapped on for Tomasz Gal held up Menno behind, held up Nitro Shooter, and now that is a 1-second lead for Milan Mayer ahead.
Yeah, and Milan Mayer is going to be getting the advantage. Or no, he's not got the DRS advantage.
He's going to be
yet.
held up here, actually.
Very slightly, only very slightly, because he's going to have some great exit. He's got better traction. Look at that. You can see he's looking for the gap, and to be honest,
no
Molnay has every right to defend his position. This is pride. This is for himself. But Milan Mayer's going to be screaming behind the wheel. He's going to be absolutely annoyed as he's trying to go around the outside of any form of corner. He's trying to go wide through turn, that's turn 7.
Oh, don't make a mistake! Oh, no,
He's pit maneuvered, and Milan Mayer has put himself into a horrible position, because as it stands right now, Tomasz Gal is now going to be champion.
That is so unnecessary, Milan. You have so much time. You have so much space. All of the cards are stacked in your favor. You could not be playing with more of a rigged deck. It is literally not possible. And you go and make an impatient move like that. You don't need to do it. You just don't. There is no need to make such an impatient and immature move, but when the pressure is on, when you're in a championship fight, that's when mistakes happen. And that is undoubtedly, unequivocally, a massive, massive mistake from Milan Mayer in the McLaren.
Well, while you've been ranting at the front and all too right as well, Nitro Shooter had an attempt at Menno but couldn't make the overtake happen. Meanwhile, Andrew Karapi got past his teammate of Thomas Gao. And that being said, Andrew Karapi, home race, I can't emphasize it enough, home race currently with a penalty to Nitro Shooter, finds himself in P2. He is in the fight to win this. And as for the championship, yeah, that's gone shambles because there's a few drivers ahead of Milan Mayer who've got 3 seconds time penalties as well. So we're going to be talking down to points. I will have to do maths to work out who is going to win this.
Well, remember, Tomas Gal also has a 3-second time penalty, so that could still yet come into play for Milan Mayer. And of course, with Tomas Gal on those hard tyres, don't discount the championship fight from Mayer just yet. He can recover, of course, if that hard-tyred Red Bull keeps falling back into his clutches. Just, I don't know what Mayer was thinking there. It's pretty much one line throughout the entirety of that first sector. He has a straight coming up. What in the world does he think he has to make that move that urgently for? Nitro Shooter is a Menno and Nitro Shooter are a second behind. I don't know. Just like looking back on that is easily the most unnecessary and aggressive move on a driver who is not in your race, realistically, that I've seen in some time.
Realistically, you can make a move into turn 10. He has a great exit through turn 8 and 9. You stick behind the driver, you put your foot down on the
You still get DRS as well.
You still get DRS, so you're going to pull away. So they're really, as we're saying, unnecessary for sure. As also Thomas Gao goes further back as Lamanen does get past and puts himself up into P4. While you're doing that, I'm going to start working out currently who's winning this championship.
Yeah, this is going to be a tough one to figure out, especially with penalties and time differences applied. Of course, we're not sure whether this one is going to be settled at the checkered flag or in the steward's office as well, with Tomas Gao having an earlier incident with a Haas driver when they were making their way through the field. But either which way, Tomas Gao in current position would win.
Also, I just want to point out, Tomas Gao, you mentioned about going to steward office. Milan Mayer will go to the steward office. Oh yeah, that's
true as well. That is
so
also
both
true.
Both of them are in potential of penalties. So as it stands, Tomas Gao is singing right here, right now. Though that's not going to help because, actually no, it's still not going to help because Milan Mayer, he is what? He's gained right back up.
3 points behind as well.
Oh,
it's a comp. I'll leave you to do some maths. Maybe break out an Excel spreadsheet, pivot table, whatever you need.
I'm going to bring out everything. I'm going to bring out the moon landing spreadsheet to the trajectory to Mars and.
Perfect. Man's got his NASA hat on, as Milan Mayer needs to have his rocket ship hat on at the moment. Needs to try and formulate some kind of a way past Roshan, but for the moment, Roshan is not going to be making that easy for him. Because Roshan has other objectives, other ideas. Like, for example, this Tomas Gao guy ahead is pretty slow. He's on the hard tyres. Why don't I just go and snipe it up the inside of him shortly as he dive bombs him into turn 1. But because he's got those better tyres on, manages to make the apex. Now they're tussling, keeping it pinned in there. Roshan, that is dangerous, my boy. But you've made it work. You've made it stick. And now the two championship hopefuls are tied up with one another in P7 and P8.
Yeah, and taking account right now, there is a big gap to Liam Stevens, who's behind. So, points-wise, it's only just Milan Mayer is currently sitting on 3 points, but with the way it stands, then Tomas Gao's going to drop back 3 seconds. That'll put him just behind Liam Stevens. That's 2 points. That's not 3-point gap. So Milan Mayer needs to get past Tomas Gao and get past Roshan to be comfortable and win this championship. And you could see Thomas Gal, if he's done the maths in his head, he knows that where he's sitting right now, he is going to win this championship. He is going to be comfortable. But if he allows Milan Mayer to get past, he will lose this championship.
He's driving so defensively as well, is Tomas Gal, absolutely peeping in his mirrors for wherever Milan Mayer is at any given moment. You can see him diving for apexes, keeping it as tight as he possibly can, defending that inside line. And Mayer just doesn't really have anything for him right now. Needs, realistically, Roshan or something to get out of that DRS, because at the moment, Tomas Gal is being given a lifeline, and it seems that Milan Mayer is not able to keep pace.
Yeah, the straight line speed from Thomas Gal has been a strength for him. We've definitely seen that car just slip through the air, and he doesn't make it easy for these drivers to get past. It's only when he's in a situation where he doesn't have DRS do we see that Red Bull struggle. Okay, through the corners, he's nowhere near it. He's nowhere near anybody. But again, tyres are going to be the major factor of this situation. They're getting older, they're getting worn down, and they're hard tyres. That being said, though, those mediums are starting to come off, so we might be seeing it somewhat so equal out come the end of this race.
Yeah, it may yet still even out, of course, but you've got to remember, if Milan Mayer is able to get past Tomas Gal at any point during this race, Tomas Gal will only fall further back if those tyres are still in that medium, slightly better window, because Liam Stevens is making progress behind these two squabbling championship hopefuls, and making that gap that should needlessly be 3 seconds for Tomas Gal is coming down even further to now just 2 seconds behind Milan Mayer. So 2.5 seconds realistically to Gal at the moment. So for Milan Mayer, what is on the table? Well, hopefully an offering of a decent overtake that isn't going to put them both in a wall, because we've already seen both drivers making mistakes on overtakes so far today, and unnecessarily making risks and bad decisions that could later impact them in the steward's office. Liam Stevens is flying behind this pair as well.
I'm just going to add another twist here. Assuming, this is on the assumption that no penalties are given out to both of these drivers. Milan Mayer, if he does overtake Tomas Gal, if the race stands as it is, will fall behind Liam Stevens and Patrick Hadler. He'll get 1 point. Milan Mayer will get 4 points if he does not get past Roshan, which at the moment, a second is growing on Tomas Gal's gap to Roshan. So that's a lot of work to do with the driver ahead, who's on the same strategy. That means they're going in with equal points. And then, according to the rules, and I assume we're going by proper F1 rules, it's the number of wins that will determine which I can count is equal, which then goes to the number of second places.
Here we
that
go.
will go in favour of Tomas Gal.
Well, here we go anyway. It's gonna be time, as Milan Mayer has made the move using DRS that he of course got from the car in front. Tomas Gal did not have that on Roshan this time around. Now this is where it's time for Milan Mayer to pull his finger out. He has to go, because I'm sure that Tomas Gal will do everything in his power to make this as awkward and irritating and jarring as possible. But now Mayer's got free air. You have to imagine that he's going to be able to use those mediums and just try and clear away from the Red Bull behind. Gal really does have no response. No battery, no tyres, no time.
Yeah, but as I mentioned, technically speaking, assuming no penalties given out, he's still winning this championship, going off the rule basis. You know what? I'll leave you to that. I'm going to read the rule sheet.
Yeah, you go ahead and I'll see whether it's on countback or not, because at the moment we're still not sure, and Milan Mayer is still not sure whether he has the pace to catch up with Roshan. At the moment, sits within that second window, but he is yet to drop Tomas Gal. And Tomas Gal isn't really being left for dead in this first sector by any means. Milan Mayer is flirting with getting out of that DRS window as well, or getting back inside of it. Every corner is a bit of a flux. He's got him on a constantly extending and recoiling piece of string, and he won't have the DRS here. He won't, unfortunately. Won't be close enough, and as a result, Tomas Gal will still be close enough behind Milan Mayer. So this is going to be that situation now starting to come up where these two are really on the same tyre at the moment. Like, the medium is falling off. The hard is only getting better. So where is this race going to end up playing out for these two? A quick update at the front of the field. Nothing has really happened. Andrew Karapi and Thomas Laminen are both looking punchy with Bartos Samaro in close tow. But of course, they have a roadblock in their way with a 3-second time penalty. That is Nitro Shooter. Without that penalty, Shooter is looking at another good result. But with it applied, he's looking at 5th place, I'd imagine. Or 4th place at best.
You want to know the answer to what happens?
Go on.
So, Section 7 states that champions, a driver/team that accumulates the most points over the season is declared champion. Section 8.1, if the 2 teams or team drivers finish the season with the same amount of points, the highest place in the championship will be awarded to A, the holder with the greatest number of first places. They are both tied. If the number of first places is the same, the holder of the greatest number of second places. If the number of second places are the same, the holder goes to the greatest number of third, and so on until a winner emerges. So, as they stand, that will be the fact that Thomas Gal has a 2nd place in Australia, and yet Milan Meyer has never finished 2nd. It's going to be Thomas Gal's.
Well, I'm going to just throw you a bone here, and you can go with this how you please. There are 3 drivers ahead of Milan Meyer who currently have track limits penalties. 3 seconds. So that is Roshan, Bartos Samaro, and Nitro Shooter. I don't think Nitro Shooter will factor into this, but the 2 places ahead of him with Roshan and Bartos Samaro almost certainly will. Now, inevitably, that gives him 2 positions and quite a considerable haul more points, so that rule may yet still not come into place. We'll have to see whether it plays out, whether Milan Meyer has picked up any warnings in his misendeavours or any problems that may afflict him later on. Of course, there are only 3 laps now remaining, and as we're about to cross the line with Menno, it's about to be down to 2. So let's get our real big thinking hats on for Milan Meyer here, because this is going to be one of those ones that just does not get sorted out of the checkered flag. It's going to be sorted out after the race with penalties applied, steward's room penalties sorted. It'll be hard to call anything, so let's focus on the race at hand. For now, Milan Meyer sits comfortably behind Roshan. Will inevitably want to make some more progress, so we'll pick that fight back up shortly. In the meanwhile, let's head back up to the front. Let's head back up to the race, not the championship, and let's see what Andrew Karapi is cooking. Because at the moment, he's been cooking for a majority of this race so far. He's got quite a lot of battery from what I can see on his steering wheel too. And that might mean that he's primed, prepped, and ready to make a bit of an assault.
Yeah, he's going to be righteous and ready to do some action. And I'm just going to quickly draw attention, only briefly. Milan Meyer's on 2 warnings, 1 warning away from a 3-second time penalty. But yeah, Andrew Karapi is really hunting down. We're getting to the point in the primest of moments where the overtakes are going to form. And he's getting himself in a good position. He isn't using any energy yet. So just pure DRS to spice things up, eyeing up his position. He's working out, where am I next going to overtake? Where am I going to pull in? I'm going to pull in early. Am I going to go around the outside, which is a more riskier move? What can he do to push himself ahead of Nitro Shooter? This 2nd place is his, nonetheless, but he still wants a shot at Menno.
Yeah, and I think if you have to have a shot at Menno, you're going to want to try and get past Shooter sooner rather than later, because otherwise he's just going to be acting as a roadblock, and it's just going to be another problem in the way. Whilst you obviously will get the DRS on somebody who doesn't have it when you get to the back of Menno, you want to get there as soon as possible. You want to give yourself as many chances as you can to take your home Grand Prix. So if I'm Andrew Karapi, this right here is the lap, the penultimate lap of the Grand Prix. This is the lap I need to get by Shooter, and there are no 2 ways about it. This has to happen now if I want to win this race. If my ambitions are to take victory at home, this has to be the place where I take it now. This time around, on the straight, whatever it might be, wherever he chooses to make his move, he's been dress rehearsing the straight a little bit, but this has to be it.
He's got a decent run through the first sector. It's looking smooth and clean. He needs a good run out of turn 8 and then through turn 9 here. Just keep the car straight lined up the rear end. Gain as much as you can into this braking zone, and great exit here. But actually, Nitro Shooter has been doing a brilliant job trying to keep ahead. He's losing out on the car ahead, and here comes Andrew Karapi. He's deploying everything he can down the inside into turn 11, and P2 is officially his, and still has battery life to fight with Menno, who is actually not too far. They're about similar battery lives. So realistically, Andrew Karapi could go for one more fight.
Yes, and Milan Meyer has taken Rishan on track and stands to gain a position from Bartos Amaro just further back down the field. You can see that. Tomas Gal will gain a position on Rishan, though, because Rishan has so many penalties, as far as I'm aware. So that's something to keep your eye on. Liam Stevens will, of course, inherit P8, so it's still yet to be sieved out and sorted out. We'll get back to you on that one. But for now, the final lap of the American Grand Prix. The Circuit of the Americas has been occupied all evening long. And Andrew Karapi has been playing a sleeper agent type game where he now has all the cards in his hand. He has DRS to go and play with. He has ERS to go and play with. He has Menno to go and chase down. Menno ahead of him, trying to do his best to run through this first sector as fast as is humanly possible. Trying to give him every advantage, every little bit, every hundredth, every thousandth could be enough. Just that distance between the front two cars. Andrew Karapi still hunting. The American looking for his first tasted victory all season long, and it would come at a better time. The end of the season at home in the Circuit of the Americas in Texas. It could be for him as we now get towards that oh so important moment. The DRS activated down this back straight. All the battery to be deployed. Menno will be dumping all of his battery as well. The DRS is the only thing that separates the two, and there's not enough time being gained by Karapi. His move is going to have to be made in the final sector if he's going to make one at all as they dive it into the apex. Braking is nice for both cars, but again, the exit for Menno is just supreme. He holds that car so well under traction, and now Andrew Karapi has no more opportunities left after turn 15, realistically. It would have to be an absolutely sensational send, like we saw some Sebastian Vettel on Kevin Magnussen, but it's not going to be the case today. It is going to be Menno, by all accounts, who will take victory here at the round 11 of season 32. A great way to end the season, to cap it off with a victory for Menno as he crosses the finish line to win the US Grand Prix ahead of Andrew Karapi and Thomas Laminen. Now we'll get to see how our championship fizzles out with Milan Meyer coming home in P5. Tomas Gal takes P8, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, without any penalties in the steward's office being applied, that gives Milan Meyer the championship.
I am going to have to run the maths. You hold up, son. As Sebastian Vettel's engineer said to him, I'm just going to get the points. So give me a moment.
Great race, though, all around. Very, very well driven by Menno. Terrible, terrible mistake by Meyer when he had the race in the palm of his hand, completely in the bag. Great result for Andrew Karapi as well. One has to mention his success this weekend. Great to see him having a good result in the USA. Really, really heartwarming to see. But that has been it for season 32, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be back, of course, with season 33 just around the corner. As Formula 4, well, that title, I don't know if it's even been decided, even after the race here.
I'm just trying to get the actual results, just trying to notify myself of how it stands. Here we go. So, as it stands, Milan Meyer comes in 5th, gets 6 points, with Tomas Gal in 8th with 3 points. It is tied in the championship, which then means sifting down is going to be not Milan Meyer, it's Tomas Gal, crowned champion,
really?
Assuming no further penalties.
We'll see.
Yeah, Tomas Gal is crowned season 32 champion.
That is very, very interesting. We'll have to see whether penalties get applied after the fact. People are talking about, in the chat already, penalties they want sorted out. This is not going to be over just yet, ladies and gentlemen. I would absolutely recommend following PSGL on Twitter to see what the announcement will end up being if you have any vested interest in this particular division. Formula 4 is, well, the race might be over, but I'm sure it is far from over right this moment. We'll leave it to the admins, we'll leave it to the stewards, and we'll leave it for you next time on PSGL. It's been a pleasure to bring you season 32. We'll see you in season 33. Reese, anything to say?
What an amazing race that was. It really is amazing to watch, and it's been a pleasure working with you. Oh, wow, what an ending. What an ending.
Yeah, great race, great season. We'll see you another time as PSGL signing off for the season.
This broadcast was brought to you by GT Omega, proudly supporting PSGL.